for those of you who don't know me, I'll just kind of quickly introduce myself. So I'm Catherine Maloney. I'm founder of Elevate Her, and yeah, honestly, it's such a joy to host these webinars with amazing people like Delphine, and yeah, get to know each other a little bit more and learn some stuff as well. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining. I'm sure all of us at one time or another have felt some type of imposter syndrome or have faced similar challenges. So I think it's really important that we talk about these issues, get them out in the open, and also learn how we can support each other as well within a community. As we know, women in aviation is a fairly small community, and we really need to pull together and support each other and learn how we can empower each other as well. So without further ado, I invite you all to kind of turn off your cameras and mute yourselves if you haven't already, and I will hand over to the amazing Delphine.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to hope the internet and tech work for me while I share my screen. Can someone please tell me if you can actually see my screen?
I got you. Yeah, we can see it.
Now, before I get started, ladies, there is audience participation. Don't worry, you don't need to say anything, but if you can use the little chat, which I'm going to be looking at on this screen, so I'll be turning this way, just to like throw in some words as and when you're invited to, please do it, because it makes it a lot easier to just kind of build a bit more of a community spirit. And given that Elevate Her and the Elevate Her girls are incredible, it's time to just bring a little bit more spice on your Thursday evenings. So today we're going to be talking about femininity in a man's world. So this is obviously quite a like spicy title, because I really wanted to delve into the crux of the issue with you and unpack some of those beliefs that will be holding you back and, you know, have held me back definitely throughout my career. And recognize that actually you don't need to be anything other than yourself in order to succeed. So this is audience participation number 1. How do you change yourself to fit in an industry designed for men? So if you can just like let me know in the chat with 1 or 2 words, go for it. Oh, stunned silence, girls. Thank you. So dressing more masculine, love that. Love that, yeah. Well, not love that you're scared to admit that you're concerned, but okay. Okay, and what about, so more aggressive, love that. Speaking more loudly, masculine energy, great. So far, kind of all on the similar thread. And how do you embrace your femininity in this world? Okay. Okay. I'm going to give you like 30 more seconds to think about how you embrace your femininity, if at all. And it's okay to say that you don't embrace your femininity in this kind of environment, because it can be really tricky when you're around these guys who are kind of like squaring up and you're like, I've got to be like a bloke now in order to kind of fit in. Okay, let's push on. Perfect. Thank you for everyone who did audience participation. There'll be more of it later, so don't worry. Staying empathetic. Yeah, love that. Good. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So before we dive in, you're probably wondering who on earth I am. So hi, my name is Delphine. I'm an occupational psychologist and leadership development consultant. I help women like you feel better in your own skin. My mission is to essentially get you at the table of power and make sure that you know that you deserve to be there. I tend to help people build out their own charcuterie board. Now, I know it's a bit random as a term, but my idea is that you can pick and choose from various low effort, high impact tools that you can use at any point during your month, during your quarter, during your year, to help you navigate the challenges that you're facing. And the idea is that it's as unique as you, because what might work for me might not work for you. But that is my aim, to give you as many different strategies as possible. Some might feel woo, some might feel great. They're all based in science. We'll get into it through this presentation and you'll see that. Okay, so first let me take you back to how that inner saboteur affected me, how I let that lack of femininity come out, how I let, exactly as you've been saying in the chat, that kind of need for aggression to come out in order to cope with the environment I was in. So this was me in 2021 at the office. you can see that I was absolutely thrilled to be there. And at the time, I was in charge of a team of 70 in our international offices. And I was kind of head of that project, which was really exciting and really fun. And the problem with that was I was burning out. I was taking really, really long days. I was working on weekends. I wasn't really asking for help because I didn't want them to know that I was struggling, you know? And the stories that I told myself was that I wasn't capable of these things without sort of double downing and doing it. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, because what if they found out that I might actually not be superhuman and I might need help? Well, this is what happened. I had a massive burnout, which landed me in hospital, as you can see from my very pale and very puffy face. And I ended up with a 40-degree temperature for 2 days, tonsillitis for a week, which is the puffiness, and I was bedbound for the next 5 weeks. And when I came back from that burnout, I came back to an office which did not miss me. I came back to an office where all of my projects had been given to other team members, and I wasn't allowed to take those projects back. I came back to my promotion having been given to someone else. And I came back to an environment that basically said, oh, but you weren't here to show face. And I thought, this sucks. So, you know, fast forward a year and I quit. And it did take me a year to quit because I was scared too, because I thought, well, it's going to look like I failed. And actually the massive win is that I'm out of that environment. But I'm also not endorsing that for you, because that isn't necessarily a solution. For me, it was, because corporate just wasn't for me. But for you, if you're in a male-dominated industry, you're in aviation. There are blokes everywhere, unfortunately. So we've got to make sure that you are carving that path forward for other women who are going to be following in your stead. So to give you an idea of what we're going to be covering today and kind of objectives, contents for the presentation, we are going to be breaking down imposter syndrome, really understanding it, where it comes from. We're going to make you become friends with your inner saboteur to make sure that you know exactly why it comes up and what it represents, so that you know how to navigate that. Finding your authentic voice, because that femininity, that authenticity, that's you, and that needs to shine through, because no one can do you like you can. Okay. The next is going to be advocating for yourself in male-dominated spaces, because again, finding that voice is great, especially in this environment. It's pro-woman, not anti-man, but you also need to find a way of advocating for yourself with the men, because they need to also be part of this process of change. And the final aspect of this presentation is we're going to be embracing your femininity. Drop me an emoji or a comment in the chat now if that sounds okay and you're happy to continue. One will do. Anyone? Awesome, thank you. Okay, girls, and some more audience participation. Are you so ready? In your mind's eye, list 3 people that you think are capable of anything, fearless and inspiring. I'm going to give you like 10 seconds, okay? And then I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and all you're going to have to do is add in another emoji. Cool. I need like a countdown timer sound in the background for this. Okay. Who thought of a celebrity or some famous person? Just put like a thumbs up in the chat. Who thought of their colleagues or their friends? Who thought of their family or their partners? Did anyone think of themselves? Ooh, I'm loving these thumbs up. If these thumbs up are for yourselves, go you. Love that. Okay, cool. We're going to harness more of that energy. Okay. So step 1, love that, Diana. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, step 1, section 1, understanding your femininity and your masculinity at work. We're going to step into energetics. Okay, so on your screen, you should be seeing 2 little swirls of energy. Now, when it comes to work and when it comes to this divide between masculine and feminine energy, we tend to think, exactly as you mentioned before, that masculine is like aggressive, controlling, is like present, is doing, is logic, is reason, is now kind of energy. And that's typically the energy that we tend to step into when we believe that we're being left behind, when we believe that there isn't space for us at the table, and when we believe that we have to prove something. Everything happens now. we don't think about the smaller details, and sometimes it can feel really incongruent with who we are, because ultimately we need more rest, we need more flow, we need more time for ourselves to actually compound that creativity, that movement, that intuition. Whereas on the other side, this feminine energy is exactly that. It's way more collaborative, it's nurturing, it's gentle, it's building this community, as we've done at Elevate Her. And often when it comes to a work environment, we tend to kind of poo-poo that and put it to one side and say, I can't be that. You know, I can't be in the middle of my month on my period and crying because someone said something miserable to me and feeling rubbish, because they're not going to understand. And ultimately, no, they're not, but they should. And you shouldn't, and I really, really, really want to stress this and kind of hone this in for you. You shouldn't feel like you have to be anything but yourself in this entire process at work. And you shouldn't feel like you have to limit or apologize for yourself while you're at work just because you're stepping into your feminine energy. Because here's the kicker. You need both in order to move forward. You cannot have yin without the yang. It just doesn't work. And actually, as we're going to see now, when it comes to work environments and leadership and what it takes to make good teams, transformational leadership is in. So, think male, think manager model is a principle from the 1970s. And this idea is kind of more aligned with what we think of leadership and office dynamics. So if you kind of imagine the boss yelling at you and being super transactional, and it's goals led and KPI led, and why wasn't this done? And, you know, very big, bolshy, aggressive energy, that kind of energy we spoke about at the very, very beginning, right? And that think male, think manager model is associated with progress in a very masculine approach. We don't care about people's feelings. We don't care that they've got families. We don't care that they've had a bad day. We don't care that they've slept badly. It's missing that human aspect. Whereas since COVID in particular, so we really are on a very, very beautiful upward trend at the moment. Since COVID, we've seen a massive push towards transformational leadership. And that leadership is far more collaborative. It requires much more engagement with the human. It engages everyone at any stage in their career and asks them, what do you think you need to progress? How can I help you from my position? And we're going to see how this is super, super helpful when it comes to finding advocates for yourself. But the core of it is being authentic to who you are. And funnily enough, the core of it is also stepping into that feminine energy, because it is all about engaging with the more empathetic side. As we said in the chat as well, being more empathetic, showing who you are, being more authentic, being a bit softer. But the fun aspect of all of this is that you can still be brilliant all the way through. It's just a slightly different approach. So what's actually getting in your way? Most of the time, the thing that's getting in our way is ourselves, with the stories that we tell ourselves. And all of those stories lead to how you feed your inner saboteur. If you think of it like a flame, you're adding fuel to the fire, and it's just burning bright. And those stories can look like, I'm not capable, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't be here, I need to be perfect, what if I don't get this, they're going to think bad about me. Do these stories resonate for anyone? Again, just an emoji or a thumbs up or a yes in the chat would be amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And how helpful are these stories actually? Realistically, they're not massively helpful, are they? So let's have a look at what's actually going on in your brain. And this is one of my favorite little graphics here, like brain saying, look, and your heart's going, look, and your brain's going, no, I'm busy. So when it comes to negative thought patterns and overthinking and all those sort of horrible stories that we tell ourselves, there is a reason why this happens. And that's because of sort of negative bias. So cast your mind back to your ancestors trawling the Serengeti, trying to hide from predators. The idea was that any negative thing in the environment would spark a reaction to keep you safe. So ultimately, this whole process is to keep you safe. And because of that, our brains are hardwired by evolution and biology and chemistry and physiology to see the negatives in the world around you to keep you safe. So from a KPMG study conducted in 2021, they asked like 5,000 people in offices, tell me about your worries, tell me about your fears, tell me about the sort of negative things that you say about yourself. And 85% of those respondents said that most of the time their worries just didn't happen. Because if we think about worries in general and how often we have worries, we have about 80,000 thoughts a day. 95% of those are negative and 85% of those are repetitive. So you are spinning around these worries that just don't happen ever. Ever, ever, ever. These are mountains that you will never have to climb because they're actually molehills and you're just not seeing it. And of the remaining 15% of the worries that actually do happen, 79% of respondents said that actually they could handle those worries way better than they thought. And actually the worst case scenario that they came up with, I mean, the actual reality just never came close. It was like a dot and a line. It just wasn't even aligned, right? And so from that, this evidence has now shown that 97% of our worries are completely baseless and they are created entirely from your own brain. Now, okay, that sounds really negative. However, the amazing part of that is that if you actively and positively shift that perspective to one that is more positive, more engaging, more happy, more energizing, you can start training those 80,000 thoughts a day that are 85% repetitive to be 95% positive. And how do you do this? So this is one of my favorite things, because I always stumble on this, but it's called the reticular activating system. And it kind of acts like a filter, like a grayscale filter, which is why you're looking at a taxi in New York. And so essentially how this works is it's like a little bundle of cells in your brainstem that sits in the kind of ancient part of your brain, again, to keep you safe. And it cherry picks the world around you according to what you feed the machine. So if we're sitting with the negative bias, you're not taking an active sort of engagement or participation in changing that narrative, okay? It will go negative, 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 right? And if you start putting in the positive or the reverse, it'll find exactly the same thing in the world around you. And it completely grays out everything else. So another aspect of where this comes from is that imposter syndrome that we spoke about. So now that you know that there's negative bias, and now that you know that there's a grayscale filter in your brain, let's talk about how imposter syndrome is like a new lens for that. So imposter syndrome, I'm sure you know, is this feeling of inadequacy, of not being good enough, of not being capable enough, of feeling like it was luck that got you somewhere, or that someone helped you and it's not really your own accolades, your own ability. And it's also complete nonsense. As a principle in the 1970s, and it became relevant when women started moving from their kind of like PA roles into every other aspect of the business. And as you can imagine, during this big time of social economic upheaval, the menfolk were not massively thrilled. And so there was a lot of tension. And that's when two women actually in psychology decided to write a paper called Imposter Syndrome. And that expressed and described the very intense feeling of unease that these women were experiencing. We're not in the 1970s and 1980s, girls. We are smashing it every single day. Women are financially more stable than men at the moment. We are much more educated than men at the moment. And this is just stats, okay? This isn't a read by any means. It's just stats. We have so much higher EQ and SQ. We are fundamentally more capable. We bleed every single month and don't die and still succeed at every single thing in life. If they did the same thing, they would drop dead. Imposter syndrome is a figment of your imagination. Please do not let it take over. It will be categorized by these four things that, I mean, I have experienced, I'm sure you have experienced, but I promise you there are ways to handle this, which will come out later in the presentation. So a lot of us will feel quite anxious. And that was definitely something that I felt during that sort of 21, 2022 span when I was in corporate at that very, very peak point of that project. And it was this sort of sense of like, they are going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing. And that negative self-evaluation was like, if I grind myself into the ground, no one will know, because no one can hurt me if I don't think I'm good enough at these things. Then there's the stress. And then there's this perfectionism that I'm sure so many of us have been told in the interview, if you say that you're a perfectionist, it's actually like a positive and a negative, when actually it really isn't very healthy for you. Fundamentally, the degree to which you experience imposter syndrome is so fundamentally linked to how you view yourself and your role. So if you believe that you are incapable and people will find you out, your imposter syndrome, your anxiety, your perfectionism, your sense of incapability will be through the roof. But if you believe that you are that girl, you are that pilot, you are the one and only, imposter syndrome is like in the rearview mirror and you haven't even seen it. Okay, so this is how you're going to win, regardless of those feelings, because we're now actually going to look at the strategies on how you're going to fix it. Quickly in the chat, is everyone doing okay? And you ready for section 3? Just an emoji will do. A sip of water. Yay. Ooh, that's my light. Awesome. Thank you so much. Am I going too quickly or are we okay? I think we're good. Awesome. I love it. I love talking to myself. I'm kidding. Okay, so the number one thing the number one strategy that I want to give you to handle your imposter syndrome and that negative feedback loop is naming that inner critic. So that inner critic, whether that's your inner saboteur, whether that's the voice of your instructor, whoever it is, I want you to name that inner critic. And if you can see the little monster in the right hand corner, I call mine Nigel, and I imagine him as a kind of like toothy, random little creature, like a little cartoon that kind of sits on my shoulder, and I'm like, yo, what's up? So the idea on how this works is when you name the thing that's like saying you're not good enough, you're not capable, can't do this, no, don't do that, you start to separate yourself from the feeling. So you have the feeling instead of being the feeling. And this is a huge first step, because once you've done that, you realize that actually you yourself, you're just experiencing the actual event. Okay, you are witnessing it, and that is a huge power shift. So you are not incapable, you are witnessing the feeling of being incapable. Okay, and when you enter into this position, you can start to have a dialogue with Nigel. I'm going to call him Nigel for now. You can have a conversation with Nigel and say, why are we feeling like this? Where is this coming from? What is happening? And what's happening is, if we look at the screen, the comfort zone is where Nigel likes to live. Okay. And as you're going into the stretch zone, at the edge of that comfort zone, that white line, Nigel's going, whoa, 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 time out. Can we just like take a step back and notice that this is a problem? And when you start to notice when that comes up, you start to realize that Nigel is actually just trying to keep you safe. Because every time, again, your ancestors, every time they stepped out of their comfort zone, they increased their chances of being eaten. Now, you're obviously not going to be eaten, I hope, but anytime soon by a predator. However, whenever you hit that new sort of level for yourself that is outside of your comfort zone, that reaction, that nervous system reaction in your body doesn't know the difference between being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or going and sitting your exam. Okay, and so when it comes to that comfort zone point, Nigel is an amazing way of saying, actually, I'm about to level up and I have reviewed all the material. I'm ready to take that next step. Come with me. And when you step over that comfort zone line into this stretch zone, when you start to find this like challenge exciting, you get into that flow state, you get that itchy brain, and you're like, oh, this feels good. It feels good to be in that kind of like new state. Nigel comes with you. And that comfort zone expands. And then you reach the next level and it keeps going. So actually, there's a lot more compassion that you can have for yourself. And that knock-on effect from having more compassion for yourself when you name that inner critic and when you spot when it comes up is that actually you can't say horrible things about yourself because you're just in the learning phase, and you would never criticize anyone to be in a learning phase, because how are you supposed to be a pro at something you've never done before? So that's number one. Number two is for my visualization girlies, anyone who likes doing a manifestation board, anyone likes doing a mood board. Visualization is essentially your way of being a playwright and writing your own life exactly how you wish to live it. So you can either do this as a timeline, as you can see on the screen, where you do it in chronological order, and you can either write it down. If you like writing, you can write it down and you put down every single win you've ever had in, let's say, the last 3, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. And the thing here is that there is no such thing as a small win. All wins are wins. And there's no such thing as a professional versus a personal win. They're all wins because you did that. And we don't need to worry about, oh, but someone helped me, because realistically, the only way you're going to win is by having help at some degree, whether that's emotional support, physical support, financial support, etc. So build a timeline of your wins, and then that becomes a physical representation of everything that you've done. In the case of sort of aviation, maybe it's everything to do with aviation and the personal battles, challenges, hurdles that you've cleared in your mind as you've been going through it. The other version of visualization that I personally like to do is if you have a vivid imagination, and I know that you have, because in order to go into aviation, you have to think beyond the sort of lateral thinking that people in the corporate world think, right? If you imagine in your mind's eye that you are writing a screenplay or the next episode of your favorite show, which, by the way, will be the Your Name show, so the Delphine show, right? You imagine everything that your character, i.e. you, would do. And if you start to daydream about all the things that could go well, like you passing that exam, or you doing well in the sim, or you doing well in like whatever presentation or interaction, your brain starts to decide, oh, actually, this is reality. And when you start to kind of add in that image, you are training your reticular activating system, that grayscale filter. You're clicking in the like, we are winning lens. And all it sees is evidence of you winning in your reality. And that momentum builds. So the more wins that you see, the more wins that you have. It really is magical. And that is how manifestation will work. But if you prefer writing it down, that's exactly the same kind of way. Just choose your preference. The next one I want to give you is to kind of calm that stress response down when it hits. So this is more of a reactive. It can also be proactive, but it's more of a reactive strategy. So breath work essentially works to slow down that stress response. And if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that when you're stressed, the bits of the brain that light up are kind of like at the back of the brainstem. And if we think back to the reticular activating system, I know, super like rolls off the tongue, it sits in exactly the same region. So when you're really, really stressed, it kind of goes like, God, panic. How do we move away from this like saber-toothed tiger, which is actually, I don't know, like stressful instructor, right? So I'm going to give you a couple of strategies on how to use breath work to your benefit, anytime, any place. There are degrees of intensity, which you'll see on the next slide. So use with caution. But briefly speaking, when you are stressed and you're in that fight or flight response, all the blood rushes to the outside of your body so you can run away. And your rest and digest system basically stops. And that's when you get the like sweaty palms, quickness of breath, heartbeat goes up, and you're kind of like, oh God, that anxiety is like rising and rising, and you can kind of feel it like, oh, don't know how to get out of that. Breath work serves to push everything back into your central system and engage that rest and digest system. So you become really relaxed. And when you are relaxed, you kind of like melt into your chair. You kind of like, you're not feeling any tension or anything. So it really is an incredibly powerful tool, and it's free because you're doing it now. If you didn't, obviously you drop dead, and you're doing it now for free. So if you do it with intention, you can really reap the benefits of something so magical and so simple. So these are the three strategies that I really want to talk to you about and bring you along on this journey. So the first one is the 4-7-8 method. Does what it says on the tin. You breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and you breathe out for 8. And with all of these, I'd honestly recommend doing this 10 or 20 times, but you can do the 4-7-8 method anywhere. Around people, it's not going to be strange, it's not going to look weird. Then the middle one, Nadi Shahada, I probably butchered that, apologize. That's breathing in through one nostril and breathing out through the other in this kind of circular motion, whichever way you prefer. And that, essentially, if you imagine what waves sound like lapping on a beach, that mimics the kind of natural flow that you'd be hearing around you. And that, again, serves to really reduce down your anxiety. And that can also be used to energize. And the last one is the physiological sigh. So the physiological sigh, I won't ask, but if anyone's had a proper sob session, you will probably know that when you are in full sob mode, the breath that you take in order to kind of add oxygen back in is this. And that is the physiological sigh. So the way to do this with intention is to breathe into the belly, into the chest, and out all through the mouth. So it goes, and if you repeat that maybe 10, 20 times, I'd recommend lying down. So this is probably the least applicable in the outside world, but if you're at home, you can do this before your day for about 2 to 5 minutes. I mean, it really doesn't take that long. You end up getting that little tingly percolation feeling across your body, which is exactly that sort of rest and digest system being energized with oxygen. And when I say to you, it clears brain fog like I've never experienced before, it is such a cheat code and you need to know about it. So when those feelings of anxiety, overwhelm, stress, imposter syndrome come up, breathe with intention as your first port of call, and I promise you, you will reduce those feelings by 40% within the first minute. Okay, this one's one of my favorite ones, brain waves. Okay, it's the occupational psychologist in me, I'm sorry. So I'm sure you've heard of flow state. So flow state is this idea of being focused on one thing at a time and getting in kind of in that like trance-like zone. You're in the zone and you're like super flowy, and it's that feeling of when 2 hours feels like 10 minutes, and you look at the clock like, wow, I've done so much. So if you look at the screen, flow state is the kind of like alpha wave, okay? And it's where that creativity comes out of. It's that sort of really calm state that you're in. Theta waves, so delta waves are the ones that you have when you are dreaming and when you're asleep. And theta waves are the brain waves that happen when you are in your subconscious and when you're kind of in that lucid state of dreaming. So if you've ever woken up in the morning and you've kind of been half in and half out of a dream, and you can kind of change the dream, that's essentially what theta waves are. Now, just bringing you back to visualization, when you are visualizing and you're kind of in that daydreaming state, that's difficult to say, daydreaming state, theta waves is what you're activating. And what happens when you go into that sort of theta wave moment is that you are in your subconscious. So that is where your biggest fears reside, that is where your stories reside, and that is where your greatest creativity resides. So this is how you're going to access it. Binaural beats. So essentially all this is like flowy music, and it's that spa music, you know, when you go into a spa and it's all that woo kind of music and you feel immediately relaxed, is because you're putting yourself into that trance and your subconscious is like, okay, cool, I'm allowed to be flowy now. How this works for you in a period of intense stress or anxiety, or when you're experiencing imposter syndrome and you're not sure how to navigate it, is you're going to listen to very specific music. I'm going to be sending around a handout after this with some examples for you, so you don't have to search it, but this is the science very briefly on how it works. The music has 2 different frequencies. One that might be at like 220 in one ear and the other will be at 210 in the other, and your brain hears the 10 hertz difference. So the way that music works is it kind of brings your brain waves to slow down to this theta wave moment, or alpha wave, depending on which kind of music you're listening to, and it instantly relaxes you. So when you're feeling unsure, you can literally have a playlist in and ready, plug it in, and you can start saying affirmations, visualizing your wins. You can start breathing. You can start speaking to Nigel, probably in your head, not out loud when you're in public, but you can do all these things while listening to music that is designed specifically to hack your physiology to help you win. And it's a bit left field, but bear with me. Okay, comments again. How is that? Are we okay? I'm going to take a quick water break. Are we feeling okay? Everyone following, let me know. Amazing. Okay, I love it. All these thumbs up and faces. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. Okay, part 2 of how you're going to win regardless. So now that we've looked at the internal stuff, I'm hoping that you've kind of taken some notes. Again, there's a handout, so don't stress if you've missed anything. So we've done our inner world, because that is the most important, and the priority in all of this is you. Now we're going to do the outer world, and this is the boys club. Okay, so communication and how you express yourself. The way that you express yourself, the way that you feel about yourself is exactly the kind of beacon and information that you send out to the world around you. And the flow that you're seeing, yeah, Nigel, thanks, Caroline. The flow that you're seeing on your screen right now is something that I use all the time with clients. And it's the idea that if your thoughts impact your feelings impact your behaviors, and your behaviors impact your actions, you need to be in charge of your thoughts. So if you're feeling miserable, if you're thinking that you're incapable, you feel miserable, Your behaviors might be that you hold yourself back, you don't put yourself forward, you don't ask for help, you don't take the opportunities that present themselves, and your actions show that you're underconfident, you're not available to the opportunities around you, and you get passed over for anything, any new exciting opportunity that comes your way. On the flip side, if you think that you're the bee's knees and you feel like you are that girl and you've got that spring in your step, your behaviors are that you're kind of glowing, you're far more playful, you might be cheeky, you might put yourself out there in a way that you've never done before, and you ask for things that you never thought you could do, and you're like, let's just see what happens. If I ask for this, what would happen? If I do this, what would happen? It's this kind of like push the button and find out. And then your actions mean that people actually respond to that. And so when you're in an environment that you feel like you have to be a particular way, you are in the scarcity mindset that is a beacon to other people. The clearest way I can explain this is if you've ever been at a party and there's someone in the corner and they're kind of like low energy and they're being a bit weird, and you're like, oh, I'm going to do everything I can to avoid that person. That's the kind of energy that you are putting out when you believe that you have to be anything but yourself. Whereas when you are yourself, regardless of the environment, regardless of who's in the room, because ultimately the thing that is most important about you is the stuff that cannot be taken away from you. And that's the stuff on the inside, which is why we focus on it first. You become the life and soul of the party, and people naturally gravitate towards you. People naturally go like, oh, she's super confident. She emits this happiness, this glow, this contentment, this ability to get anything she wants. That's the luckiness. The luckiness starts with you, and it is a very active thing. And when we think about this in a kind of work context, on the more positive side, you start to hear, feedback as constructive, as useful. You start to take what is useful to you and leave what isn't. You communicate clear boundaries. You realize that your worth is not assigned or associated with a number or what someone else says about you. What they think is none of your business. As long as you're dotting your I's and crossing the T's, you're absolutely fine. And you feel empowered by that. On the negative side, you start to hear that constructive criticism as maybe negative and personal. You start to caveat yourself. Someone gives you a compliment, you go, oh, thank you, but, and then immediately a caveat comes out. We've done that so many times. I'm sure I'm not the only one that when someone gives me a compliment or used to give me a compliment, I'd be like, oh, thanks, immediately say a horrible thing or like, oh, no, I look awful today or whatever. Ridiculous. Take the compliment. The other thing is when you're in this headspace and you don't believe that you are good enough, obviously imposter syndrome comes out, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling low, disenchanted, and that is a kind of like bank run effect. It amplifies. Whichever way you sit, it amplifies. Okay, so how are we going to change the stories to make it beneficial to us moving forward? Every single time that you say that you can't, say that you can. One way that I like doing this that will force you to do it and make sure that it's active is every time you walk through a doorway, say a positive affirmation. You'll realize A, how many times you go to the loo, and B, how exciting and useful and beneficial it is. Because the first few times it's going to feel a bit weird and odd and a bit uncomfortable. And then by the end of it, you're going to walk through like, I am the greatest. And and when you walk into that room with that energy, people will go, who is she? What is she on? And can I have some? Right? So I really want you to find a way to spin the negatives into a positive, even if those affirmations feel scary, finding a way to make them kind of like a half affirmation. I'm learning, I'm trying my best, I'm seeking out advocates, I'm, calling out for mentors, or I've got a really good group of girls around me, whatever it is. Changing those stories for yourself is the number one way that the outside world is going to respond to you. The next one on this is finding allies and mentors. So we've already spoken about this at the beginning. We need to go back to this think male, think manager model. The reason that model worked so well is because guys going through the system could see themselves in 20 or 30 years in the positions that they wanted, and they could see a direct reflection of who they were going to be. And I'm sure you've all sat through International Women's Day events where we all know the problems, we're talking about all these things, we know exactly what's going on, but the missing ingredient is involving the guys, because we can solve about 75% of the problem, but we need them to kind of help on the other side. So finding your allies and your mentors, whether that's having a coach, whether that's having a community hit, whether that's having another woman in the industry who's a bit older than you, who can give you that emotional support. But also, very importantly, bring in the men, okay? It is a tough time to be a man right now. They are not having a good rap because some of them have been very badly behaved. However, the ones that really want to help, really, really, really want to help. And when you align yourself to various people and you have a panel of elders, whether they're older than you or not, that can help you with exams, can help you with how to dress, for example, for interviews. That was a question that came up the last couple of weeks for me with a client, and can help you troubleshoot anything that comes up through your journey, wherever you are in your journey. It is invaluable, the information that can come. Also, if we're just going to call a spade, we all think differently. So having people who think from completely different perspectives, backgrounds, life stages, career stages, whatever it is, you are going to build the most incredible panel to present your concerns, your problems, your thought processes to, and that in turn builds your confidence. Find people that are aligned with your vision and who will challenge you positively. I'm not sitting here and telling you you should find someone who's going to knock you down at every opportunity or just agree with you every opportunity. You need someone to go, are you sure? For me, that's my mother. But the person who goes, are you sure, to kind of help you shift into that really confident mindset. The other thing that's massively helpful with that is it strengthens your own voice, because you need to find your own voice. And if your gut is telling you, no, I don't agree with that, listen to your gut. She knows what she's talking about. On the flip, if she's like, actually, I could do with that, or maybe this is right, listen. So you are your own ally, but also find mentors. Okay. Reflection and Q&A. I hope you're excited. This is my favorite bit of the whole presentation. How are we feeling? Drop me a few more things in the chat and I'm going to take another water break. Awesome. Love that. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. So, audience participation. What do all of these women have in common besides being slightly pixelated on my screen? I need, like, exactly, they're powerful, they're confident, they know who they are. Thank you. If we take Taylor, she is taking the whole world by storm at the moment. She is her own institution. Rihanna was pregnant while she did this. Beyonce is also an institution. If we're talking about Kamala Harris, she is breaking down boundaries, whether you agree with her politics or not. She is breaking down boundaries at every single opportunity. What they all have in common, exactly, they are resilient. They are unapologetic with themselves. They stand up. They shout out when something is wrong. They question what doesn't align with them, and they don't have time for the stuff that holds them back. You are all of these women in one, because you are your own unique blend of this. You just need to tap into it. So this is how we're going to do it. I want you to ask yourself, how are you going to show up? Who are you going to be? What are you no longer available for? How are you going to speak to yourself? How much grace can you have yourself? And who do you want to be? Who is she? If you're thinking about all of these things, who is she? How does she move? How does she talk? How does she take up space? When I think about who I am when it comes to this, I think about all of the things that are fundamentally my own and are fundamentally aligned to me. What is the number one thing that no one can take away from me? Well, the number one thing that no one can take away from me is my knowledge. It is my energy. It is my ability to find a way to conflict resolution without using violent language or without being aggressive. It is my ability to come into the room and back myself at every opportunity. All of those things are inherently me. They are inherently feminine because they lean on empathetic. They also lean on the masculine energy that we talked at the beginning, because I'm not letting anyone tell me what I can and cannot do. There is logic and there is a reason behind it, because I have decided it is so, right? And when you think about the bare bones of what that represents, it has nothing to do with physical appearance. It has nothing to do with whether I'm wearing makeup or not. It has nothing to do with the fact that I have ovaries, and it has everything to do with who I am. So who is she for you? And when you have outlined who she is, you start to build a picture and a kind of roadmap on who you need to be and who you have, how you have to show up to be that person. And when you start to do that, reticular activating system, lens, who is she? The world starts to cherry pick and confirm 80,000 thoughts, 85% repetitive, confirm exactly who you've created with the world around you, and you become that person. Okay, this is my absolute favorite one. So, in a world designed for men, your femininity is your superpower. Own it and let it lead your success. Thank you so much for your time today. These are the points that we've spoken about. That your inner world and your stories determine your success. It's like the world around you is your stage. You need to find advocates, create safety from the inside. And what would she do? Create your her, create your she, it's elevate her, create your her. Love that. If you would like to chat to me at any point, these are my details on screen. They will also be sent round again. If you'd like to brainstorm, talk a bit more, whatever it is, you know where I am. Thank you so much, ladies. I will